From the mythological era, every 200 years, the goddess Athena and the earth king Hades would engage in a battle, and the time for that battle is about to come once again. When the world is plunged into chaos, the hope warriors of goddess Athena will appear. They represent the constellations and always risk their lives to fight. In 18th century Europe, we meet a boy named Alone. While walking on the road, he sees two young men bullying a dog and goes to protect it. These two men want to take the dog back to eat because it had eaten the food they had worked to buy. Alone takes out his precious ink bottle to exchange, and they agree. Knowing that selling the ink bottle would fetch a good sum of money, but before they could take it away, a young man named Tenma, Alone's friend, rushes out and kicks both men in the mouth to retrieve the ink bottle for his friend. Alone wants Tenma to stop because the two men have their own reasons, and Alone doesn't like conflict but only wants peace. The two men realize that both are orphans from the orphanage and are surprised that two people with such opposite personalities can be friends. Alone then goes to continue painting his picture of the goddess. While painting, Alone's teacher brings a pastor from the forest cathedral. This person came because he was attracted by Alone's painting. Alone knows that the forest cathedral contains a painting of Saint Michael that has never been revealed to the public. Any sinner who sees the painting will repent. Alone very much wants to see that painting, so he tries to become a person of reputation in the church. The man wonders why Alone hasn't painted the eyes for the painting, and he replies that he hasn't found the right shade of red. The man directs him to the northern mountain, saying there are flowers dyed by the blood of angels with broken wings, and that color is the true color. Alone then climbs the mountain with the dog. The dog suddenly barks a few times and runs ahead, forcing Alone to follow. They both arrive at the place the priest mentioned. This place has many flowers and is full of true colors, but this red is still not the color Alone is looking for. But since he's already here, Alone decides to paint the scenery. Animals gather around him, but suddenly they all stand up and run away, sensing something frightening. A girl appears and introduces herself as Pandora. She has been searching for Alone for a long time to bring her king back. To do this, she needs Alone's body, the body of the person with the purest heart. She then places her lips on Alone's, and a ring appears. She kneels down and calls Alone the king of the underworld, Hades. Ghosts from the underworld have flooded into the human world, and it's unfortunate for them when they encounter a warrior of Athena. He throws dragon punches and knocks them down in one hit. He is the warrior of Libra, Doko. He knows that their gathering means Hades has been resurrected. Doko wants to know Hades' location, but they are loyal and will not betray their king. Alone later wakes up at home. Tenma had sensed uneasiness and went up the mountain to find Alone unconscious and brought him back. Alone drops the necklace Pandora gave him and suddenly lunges down, not letting Tenma touch it. Suddenly, Tenma hears news that water from the river is about to flood the town, and people in the city gate have closed it, abandoning them to be swept away by the water. Alone wants to go use words to persuade, but Tenma wants to do something instead of relying on others. Tenma wants Alone to remember the promise between them and their friend from years ago. Tenma decides he will protect his family and friends at all costs. He runs to the river and sees that a boulder has diverted the river's flow, so he wants to break it. But what breaks is Tenma's hand. Doko, walking in the forest, senses a weak energy and runs to find Tenma. In his helplessness, Tenma thinks of Alone and the children, and the power within him erupts and intensifies, helping him break the huge boulder and return the river to normal. Doko rushes down to bring Tenma up and acknowledges his amazing strength. He then invites Tenma to become a warrior of Athena. When returning, Tenma sat for Alone to paint a picture before leaving with Doko. Alone wants to find a color like Tenma's eyes, but doesn't have enough skill yet. So Alone thinks Tenma should go, and when he returns, Alone will have improved his skills and finished the painting. Tenma then goes to meet Doko. He sees Alone and is startled a bit before leaving with Tenma. At Athena's sanctuary, there are 12 zodiac houses governed by 12 warriors representing those zodiac signs, and a hall where Athena frequently descends to supervise. Just now, Tenma has finished training when suddenly a group comes looking for him. The young man in front asks Tenma if he wants to spar a bit, and Tenma immediately accepts. Those behind think he shouldn't mess with Tenma, but this young man believes that the great Dado has never feared anyone. Tenma has heard of Dado and thinks he's an arrogant and violent person. The two young men then rush at each other, constantly exchanging blows, but Dado manages to dodge and land a punch on Tenma. Tenma is frustrated by his defeat and is mocked by Dado, who tells him he should go back to his village. Angry, he punches a rock, but only hurts his hand without breaking the rock. Doko has returned and sees that Tenma has been here for months without accomplishing much. Tenma doesn't understand why he could break rocks before, but can't now, so Doko explains that he still doesn't understand the principle of power. He then explains some physics knowledge about atoms to help Tenma understand, and says he will stay here for a while to monitor Tenma's training. Tenma accidentally senses a familiar figure and runs to catch her. He recognizes the girl and the bracelet. It's Sasha, his and Alone's childhood friend. She doesn't recognize Tenma until he introduces himself and shows her the flower wreath. He doesn't know why she's here when she was clearly adopted. Suddenly, a monster appears and targets Sasha, so Tenma has to take the hit for her. He is then tied to a pillar while the monster continues to target Sasha. Tenma strains to break free. He rushes in with a punch that dents the ground, but the monster dodges in time and ties him up again, shocking him until he collapses. The monster then continues to beat Tenma in front of Sasha, but Sasha suddenly unleashes her power and demands the monster to release Tenma. The monster realizes who she is, making his job easier, but before he can do anything, he is dealt with by the Ares saint Shin. According to him, Sasha is now the goddess Athena. 2 years pass. Tenma is now fighting a larger opponent. Just when everyone thinks he's been defeated, he gets up and punches the opponent into a rock. A boulder falls, and Tenma rushes to punch and break it. Dado sees that he seems to have succeeded, and Tenma is now officially recognized and given the title of saint and his own armor. The high priest informs that the situation is now very urgent as ghosts have started to spread everywhere, and Tenma, who has been given the title of saint, has a duty to eliminate these ghosts to protect the world and the goddess Athena. Tenma has now finished his business and hopes Alone has finished painting too. But Alone now only sees his paintings full of gloomy colors. Everything he paints seems to die. Pandora appears and suggests that the way for him to save others is not through painting but through death. She then takes Alone to the cathedral in the forest, where the painting of repentance that Alone wanted to see is located, so she will help him realize it. He notices that the cathedral is open, and the pastor from before is waiting for him here. Meanwhile, Tenma has secretly come to meet Sasha and reminds her of old times. They both know that ghosts are approaching their hometown, so they must act soon in hope that their hometown and Alone will be okay. During this time, Alone has realized that the pastor is not human. He runs in to see the painting, but it's a painting of the underworld king Hades, yet it looks very much like Alone. The pastor shows him inside, where he sees that the children at home are all dead, because he painted them a few days ago. The pastor and Pandora begin to brainwash Alone, suggesting that death is the fairest thing, and that the children will go to a better place. Alone begins to think that death is salvation, and at this moment, the moon disappears, signaling that the underworld king Hades has awakened. During that time, a group of saint warriors was sent to deal with some of Hades' underlings. They intentionally let one escape to follow it to their lair, but when they entered the lair, they were the ones who fell into a trap. Not long after, only 3 people from the group returned to report. They informed that the ghosts were gathering at a cathedral in the forest. They then revealed their true faces and turned their armor black. They had actually died and been resurrected by Hades to return and take Athena's head. Doko and Shin rushed to intercept and decided to deal with them immediately. Sasha heard their true inner voices and tried to stop both, but it was too late. She approached the three and said she had heard their hearts, that they truly wanted to return to fight for her, but it was too late. Doko and Shin felt ashamed for having to attack their comrades and decided to take people to deal with that cathedral in the forest. Doko then announced the plan to Tenma and Dado. Doko wanted Dado not to push himself too hard, but he said he wouldn't let Tenma beat him. Tenma knew they were about to return to their hometown, and he would try to protect Alone in Sasha's place. Not long after, they arrived at their hometown. Tenma, worried about Alone and seeing a pillar of light shining in the city, separated from the group to go alone. Doko only hoped that Tenma wouldn't be too hasty. But now, the scene before him was full of dead people and the town engulfed in flames. He ran home to find only Alone's paintings covered in blood. A figure came to use him as a sacrifice for Hades, but Tenma was completely enraged. He blocked the attack and returned a full-force punch that sent the attacker flying. Alone, realizing Tenma had returned, decided to meet him as promised to show him the painting he had made. Tenma was in complete despair when Doko found him. Suddenly, Dado was blown back to them. Hades, or rather Alone, also appeared. Tenma couldn't believe his eyes seeing his kind-hearted friend become such a brutal genocidal being. He remembered when the three of them were together, and when Sasha gave them the flower wreath as a goodbye before leaving. Tenma needed an explanation from Alone, but Alone only saw that Tenma was still the same. Tenma had returned as a saint, while Alone had become a painter and saved many people. But the painting of Alone from the past still couldn't be completed because he had just found the red color he needed to finish this painting, and that was the color of blood. He then drew 2 diagonal lines across the painting, and Tenma suddenly suffered severe injuries. Tenma collapsed and tore off the bracelet on Alone's wrist. Doko noticed that Alone's hair had turned black. Alone said goodbye to his 2 friends, and also to his former self, because now he would officially become Hades. Doko, without much thought, rushed to attack, but one of Hades' underlings, Kagaho, arrived and blocked the attack. His power was on par with Doko's. As Doko was about to go all out, Shin arrived to stop him and pull him back because they had more important matters to attend to. He then had to watch helplessly as Dado and Tenma fell below as the ground crumbled. Hades also ordered Kagaho not to pursue. Hades then stated that he had dealt with all his attachments and now it was time to begin the holy war. Upon returning, Hades gathered all the ghosts under his command. He revealed that each of Athena's warriors represented a constellation, so when a warrior falls, a constellation will disappear and turn black, starting with Tenma's. Hades wanted his army to blacken the entire sky with the death of Athena. Pandora called the strongest of the ghost army, Minos, to the sacred land to demonstrate his power. Kagaho then came to see Hades and asked to see his hand. Seeing the wound that Doko had inflicted on Hades' hand, Kagaho became angry and vowed to settle the score with Doko. He then went outside and saw that Minos had already left for the sacred land, so he left as well. Dado had now woken up under the rubble and found Tenma beside him. A mysterious girl passing by was surprised to find survivors. Sasha at this time dreamed of Alone completely corrupted and holding Tenma's head in his hand. She was so shocked that she woke up. Shin and Doko have returned here to report. Hearing that the entire town has been destroyed, Athena was shocked that Alone was possessed by Hades and Tenma had died. But she couldn't let her emotions show. She wanted both of them to rest early to prepare to bring troops to defend against Hades' attacks. Dokaknu Sasha was trying to appear strong. Meanwhile, Dado was trying to pull Tenma out of the rubble. When that girl appeared, Dado rushed to attack, but was grabbed by the head and slammed to the ground. She revealed she came to take Tenma away and save him before it was too late, as he wasn't completely dead yet. She introduced herself as Rika, a warrior. She then took both of them underground to her tribe's dwelling. Dado followed but didn't trust this girl at all, as she was as strong as a saint like them and knew Tenma wasn't completely dead. Upon entering, Dado saw the armors of holy warriors like themselves, so he suspected this organization was shady and tried to leave but was attacked from behind. He angrily questioned them, but the elder revealed they were allies who also served Athena. The elder then separated the armor from Dado and asked Rika to pour blood into it. He explained that restoring a holy armor requires a lot of blood, and he couldn't take blood from warriors about to go into battle, so he had to take it from Rika, whom he had trained. He then tapped a few times, and the armor returned to Dado, who felt stronger than before. Dado now believed the elder could save Tenma and went to see. The elder revealed that Tenma's soul was still lost in the underworld, and thanks to the wreath containing Athena's prayer, he hadn't gone too far yet. But once the wreath falls off completely, he would be gone forever. Dado asked what he could do to save Tenma and make Athena happy. The elder suddenly drew his sword and said if Dado wanted to save Tenma, he had to become dead to enter the underworld. He then gave Dado the sword, saying it would protect him for as long as Tenma had left. He then separated Dado's soul from his body and sent him to the underworld. Suddenly, Rika was also sent down to help Dado. She urged them to act quickly before Tenma became part of that stream of people. As they ran searching, they realized these seemed to be people killed by Hades earlier. Tenma woke up and found himself tied up. A shadow demon approached and told him he was at the border between the human world and the underworld. The demon said Hades had been quite merciful to let him linger until now. Tenma resisted but was struck back, which alerted Dado's side. The demon revealed that the strongest, Minos, had been sent to the sanctuary, and Tenma would soon reunite with his friends down here. Just as he left, the other two arrived, but a demon guard discovered them. The guard was quickly defeated by Dado and Rika, but the shadow demon from earlier also discovered them and returned. He lurked behind Rika and sneak attacked her, but Dado quickly came to protect her. Tenma warned Dado about the demon's deafening scream technique, but Rika charged in anyway and was blown away by the demon's scream ability. Dado was caught by the demon, so he kicked off the demon's hat. Angered, the demon used his scream to blow Dado away. But now Tenma had escaped. He charged straight at the shadow demon, concentrating his power and punching him, shattering the demon's armor. Dado was a bit annoyed that he came to save Tenma but ended up battered himself. He told Tenma why he was still half alive until now. Tenma then wanted to come back to life as soon as possible to protect the sanctuary, but Rika said they still had work to do down here, and this could determine the outcome of the battle at the sanctuary. Pandora now comes to report that one of their shadow demons has been defeated, and before that, this demon had reported finding Tenma's soul down there. Hades is very surprised, but Pandora still thinks it could be a mistake because Hades himself had taken Tenma's life, so he couldn't possibly still be alive. Tenma and Dado are now constantly arguing. Dado claims he came down to save Tenma only to make Athena happy. Rika wants them both to stop bickering and quickly go to the deepest part of the underworld first before planning further. Hades knows Athena must have done something for Tenma to still be alive, but Pandora assures him not to worry because Minos will certainly sweep through the entire sanctuary. As the constellations up there are gradually turning black more and more each day. Minos is now constantly throwing ropes to tie up the holy warriors. He treats them all like puppets and pulls them until their bodies are twisted and broken. They then advance and discover a field of roses. Two fools step in and die from hemorrhaging. One demon reveals these are demon roses, and even inhaling them is enough to die. The creator of this field is Gold Saint Alba. He admits these are demon roses and challenges them to enter if they wish to die, or to turn back obediently. Some demons, relying on the fact that Alba stands there unaffected by the poison, charge in, but are met with roses thrown by Alba and fall straight into the rose field. The blue armored demon reminds Minos to be careful because Alba is like these flowers, beautiful but very dangerous. Shino notices Alba is defending well out there, so they must also try to strengthen the defenses inside. They're not sure if Alba can handle everything out there alone. Shin reveals a past rumor that Alba's temple has a demon rose garden, and Alba and his soldiers had to adapt to the rose's poison. Alba perfected this to the point where his blood became the poison of the demon roses. Because of this, despite his handsome appearance, no one can get close to him. Outside, Alba challenges Minos to come down and fight. The blue-armored demon volunteers to face him, claiming immunity to the demon rose poison. However, his strength isn't enough to harm Alba, who has a type of rose that can corrode anything it touches. The demon manages to escape and begins to reveal his trump card. He releases a stream of poisonous air that causes all the roses to wither. Worried this gas might enter the sanctuary, Alba decides to absorb it all. The villagers in the sanctuary worry Alba is at a disadvantage, but a little girl still believes he won't be defeated because he's very strong. However, the villagers also worry about their own safety living in the sanctuary during a holy war. Meanwhile, Alba has absorbed all the purple poison and is immobilized. The blue-armored demon takes the chance to attack a few times but retreats, sensing danger. Alba recovers and converts the poison back to red. He then creates many poisonous thorns and stabs the blue-armored demon, defeating him. While the demon is protected by poison on the outside, his insides are vulnerable. Minos now has to enter the battle himself. He creates a whirlwind that sweeps away all the poisonous air and flower remains. He reveals that he never needed the blue-armored demon to fight because he alone is enough. He then throws his strings and catches Alba, telling him he can no longer control his own body. Noticing villagers nearby, Minos sends someone to deal with them first, while he stays to play with Alba a bit longer. Alba tries to resist, but is controlled and held back by Minos. Minos then contemplates what to do with Alba and decides to destroy his handsome face first. He made Alba punch himself in the face and then waited to see whether it would be hands or feet next. Looking at the determined eyes, he knew where to aim, but Alba then deliberately broke his own shoulder to make the previous attack miss his eyes. Minos thought Alba could do nothing now and the villagers were surely dead, but he said Minos was mistaken to think he had only set one trap. The group that went ahead earlier had now fallen into the trap of hidden weapons he had set before. Each rose that shot out would pierce the target's heart, and once it turned completely red, that person would be considered dead. Minos saw that what he said was true, so he decided to devastate Alba's body more severely. But the poison appeared once again, so he wanted to see whether he would die from his poison first, or if he would be destroyed by him first. He then used all his willpower to push the poison towards Minos, but he used his wings to block it and then made him kill himself before turning away. The villagers were now trying to evacuate, but Minos had come here and decided to destroy the rest of this village. The little girl who believed in Alba was trying to find her father, but her father had been crushed by rocks. Her father wanted her to run to the sanctuary while he would pass away right here. The girl then ran away, believing Alba was still safe. In the past, when she was walking home in the rain, Alba had given her his cloak to cover herself and told her not to come near. She only thought Alba was cold until her father told her about Alba's condition. She then ran away hoping to see Alba again, but Minos found her. Seeing she had a rose, he knew she was connected to Alba and decided to send her off as well. But Shin had come here to fight Minos. He believed that as the leader of the 12 Gold Saints, he had to stop the leader of the Spectres from rampaging anymore. But he himself was also tied up and controlled by Minos. Just as he was about to have his arm broken, a black rose cut the rope. Alba came once again despite his body being very battered. He apologized for troubling Shin, but this was a battle he had to end himself. He asked Shin to take everyone as far away from him as possible, because now he would use his final card. Minos thought that no matter how hard Alba tried, the result would still be the same. Someone without power like him would just be a toy for others. He still respected Alba's beauty, so he would let him live, but Alba refused his pity, because he had lived in solitude for so long. But that was the way of life he chose, and no one had the right to judge. He then launched a lot of poisonous blood thorns towards Minos. Shin realized Alba was using all the blood in his body to drag Minos to die with him. Alba then collapsed and Minos thought it was Shin's turn now, but Shin told him to look down. The rose that Alba had been holding in his mouth earlier was now on his chest. Actually, this was a white rose that Alba had dyed red to deceive him, and now that the rose had turned truly red, his life was considered over. He then intended to take this whole area with him, but Shin had locked him in a glass cage, making him only able to leave bitterly and resentfully. Alba then spoke his last words. He said he had lived his whole life with these roses, and this was the first time he saw them so beautiful. Shin then brought Alba's body back. The little girl had run after and asked if the holy war continued, would the gold saints die one by one? But he thought they fought for ideals and justice, not to die. It's just that if death was what they had to face while realizing their ideals, they would also fight to their last breath. Suddenly, people from the underworld came and asked Shin to lead them to the high priest. Hades now knew that Minos had died along with a gold saint, but he could still resurrect his fallen subordinates. The high priest told Shin about this, but assured him not to worry because Minos was now in the barrier created by Athena, so Hades' magic couldn't penetrate to revive him. However, they needed to defeat Hades soon before Athena ran out of strength. But the people from below informed them that in just one more day, good news would come for Athena regarding Tenma's resurrection. Meanwhile, Tenma was running without knowing where he was heading. According to Rika, they needed to reach the great tree of the underworld because the shadow beings had no concept of death. The ones they had just defeated would sooner or later be resurrected, and the way to counter them lay with that great tree. The three of them later found an exit, but as soon as they got up, they encountered the three-headed dog Cerberus. Dotto wanted to handle it himself because he still had his armor, but he could only focus on one head and was disrupted by the other two. With no other choice, Dotto had to drag the dog towards Tenma to let him deliver a blow that completely defeated it. But they hadn't gone far when Hades appeared again. Tenma was surprised to see that Hades' hair had turned black. Rika, wanting to seize this opportunity to eliminate the future threat, rushed forward but was blocked by Hades and blown away because he was busy conversing with his old friend. Hades was very pleased with Tenma's excellent survival skills. He wanted Tenma to join his side and fight against Athena, but Tenma refused because he didn't want to turn the whole world into hell. He said he would fight alongside Sasha to show Hades, or rather alone, which world was better. Hades was very intrigued by Tenma's words. Knowing that Tenma was very true to his promises, he decided to let him go and promised a future reunion. He then told Tenma to go to the Holy Land so that all three of them could meet again. Dotto then said some foolish things and got punched by Tenma. The three continued on and reached the blood waterfall. As they climbed up, Tenma felt something was wrong and turned to ask the other two, but they both suddenly seemed frozen in time. Then suddenly, a gold saint named Atmi appeared. He noticed that Tenma seemed to have just encountered the underworld king Hades once again. Tenma didn't understand why there was a gold saint in the underworld. Meanwhile, Doko had passed by Gold Saint Baron's palace. He had just heard about the shadow beings and felt that although Alba had departed and pushed back the enemy, they still couldn't be careless. The good news was that Tenma was still alive, and the bad news was that Baron suspected something was wrong with Gold Saint Atmi. The enemy had reached the Holy Land, but Atmi still refused to leave his palace. At the same time, Atmi's ideology was quite foreign compared to the other Gold Saints. It was rumored that Atmi could travel through dimensions and talk to God, so no one knew what Atmi was thinking or what his true identity was. Atmi now called Tenma the sinner of the heavenly realm and believed that Athena might lose this holy war. Tenma suspected Atmi was an enemy and attacked, but was blown down the waterfall. Not understanding what Atmi meant, Tenma was told that he and Hades had a karmic connection from many past lives, and this connection always reversed in each holy war. In previous lives, Tenma or Saint Pegasus was always close to and protected Athena, strong enough to destroy both gods and the underworld king Hades. But in this life, he was too weak. Tenma said he didn't care about what Atmi said and rushed up to fight. But Atmi reminded him that these weak attacks would never harm him. Tenma's mind suddenly saw an image of Atmi as a living Buddha, and with just a wave of his hand, Atmi made Tenma fall down the blood waterfall once again. He then asked Tenma who Tenma are and what purpose Tenma fight for. What he needs is the answer you've figured out for yourself, not the arrogant words of someone who sees himself as a hero. He then showed Tenma the 5 realms that a life must go through. The Hell Realm, the realm of hungry ghosts, the Animal Realm, the Asura Realm, and finally the Human Realm, where people must endure countless sufferings. Tenma have experienced all the suffering in the human realm before. He then revealed that your previous life had once wounded Hades, so he was afraid and hid his true body in the deepest part of the underworld, and then possessed the body of the purest human in the mortal world. That's the reason why your friend alone was corrupted. Tenma, upon hearing this, thought that it was because of himself that alone became Hades, but now he doesn't care anymore. However, he has found his own reason to fight, which is for his 2 friends Sasha and Alone. No matter what era it is, he doesn't care. He charges forward to attack, but is pushed back by Atmi. Atmi has understood your reason for fighting, but your strength is still too weak. He then stopped meditating and decided to stand up and unleash his strongest technique, the secret of the universe. Tenma is trapped in a space where he cannot counterattack or move. He will gradually have his senses taken away by Atmi, and once all are taken, his soul will disappear. He soon loses all 5 senses and no longer has any feeling or vision around him. The only thing left is his spirit, or 6th sense. He then sees Atmi killing Sasha because he thinks she is too weak and won't be able to take the earth from Hades. Tenma's senses suddenly return and he can move in this space to attack Atmi. He is determined not to let the scenario Atmi just painted become reality. He successfully hits Atmi, but in truth, what he just hit was the Great Tree of Hell. Atmi had trapped him in an illusion, but the feeling that came to his soul was real. Atmi acknowledges his abilities and decides to let him take the fruit from this tree to bring back to the elders. He also promises to duel with him on Earth one day. Doko and Rika can now move again. Tenma suddenly falls and shows them the fruit he just obtained. But his flower wreath is almost gone, so he needs to be quickly brought back to the surface. Atmi has now come to meet Athena. We learn that Atmi was born with very few senses, but with just a few senses, he could see how full of suffering this world is. When he met Tenma, he saw what kind of person he was. Atmi then asked Athena for a favor. He later met Doko again and admitted that Doko's younger brother was quite outstanding. He didn't understand how Atmi knew about Tenma, but Atmi now just wants to go into battle. Doko's group has almost brought Tenma to the surface, but as soon as they reach the surface of the underworld, all 3 are blocked by a ghost wearing beetle armor. Doko decides to stay and fight so Rika can take Tenma away before it's too late. After that, Tenma returned to the mortal world and met the elder. He asked where the other 2 were, but only Rika had regained consciousness. She informed Tenma about Dado fighting down there. Although he truly hated Dado, he didn't want him to die for his sake. At that moment, Dado was struggling in the battle below because the opponent was quite large and tough. He was grabbed by the shadow ghost, and they both simultaneously struck each other in the face. Suddenly, the sword Dado was carrying began to glow and transported him straight back to the mortal world. However, as soon as they arrived, the elder informed them that the shadow ghosts had quickly pursued them here. They were tasked by Pandora to reclaim the fruits of the great tree, but they would also find excuses to fight and eliminate Tenma's group at all costs. However, no matter how far they went, they couldn't enter because they had fallen into Atmi's illusion. He decided to send them back to the underworld. Tenma didn't know why Atmi was here. Simply put, he came to pick up Tenma and also to meet the Elder. As known, the shadow ghosts cannot die, but this thing could etch away their immortality and seal them down there. The reason Atmi came here was to turn these fruits into weapons. Outside, a rather powerful shadow had arrived, also coming to reclaim those fruits. Even if they fell onto the rocky thorns, they still survived and crawled back up. They attacked but were currently trapped by the barrier. Tenma and Dado thought this situation would be fine because they had a gold saint here, but Atmi informed them that they had to handle this themselves as he had other matters to attend to. Specifically, Atmi would use his own blood to repair Tenma's armor while infusing the power of the great tree fruit into it. While the ones outside were still trying to get in, Tenma rushed out to intercept them. He felt much stronger with this armor. Meanwhile, Atmi decided to dedicate everything he had to the cause. He then took the rosary to the top of the tower and sat in meditation to refine all of this. Rika and Dado went out to assist Tenma and informed him that they needed to buy enough time until Atmi finished refining. After fighting for a while, Tenma's group was exhausted, but the others were still as persistent as leeches. However, Atmi had begun to show significant changes, causing the shadow ghosts to worry and rush up to stop him. But Tenma chased after them to block their way. Atmi now recalled the time when he first met Athena, and she explained a few things about life to him. He thought this world had nothing but suffering, but she saw the suffering in him and believed she was the same. However, she accepted her own suffering to prove that she was still human. After that, he finished refining and began to bring those shadow ghosts into the truth of the universe, with one flick causing them to die permanently without the ability to resurrect. He could now open his eyes and see the light of life, see Tenma's true face. Atmi then passed away because he had used all his power to refine the rosary. He may be gone, but the legacy he left behind would help Athena's army fight on par with Hades' army. Meanwhile, those who had been killed by Alba's poison flowers earlier had now resurrected. They noticed that Athena's barrier seemed to have weakened and shrunk, which was why they were able to resurrect now. However, they hadn't gone far before being dealt with by Gold Saint Baron. They thought that without a poison garden like Alba's, Baron wouldn't be able to handle them. But he just stood with his arms folded, letting them charge at him. As soon as they approached, he released a shockwave and dealt with them beautifully. Doko arrived and saw that he didn't seem to need much help. Baron asked Doko to take the bodies of these guys back to the barrier to prevent them from continuing to resurrect. He had heard about Atmi's story and didn't know what Atmi had done at the underground base. Suddenly, he sensed a rather powerful being approaching, and this being was not at all good. And the one who came looking was Kagaho. He came to settle the score with Doko, but Baron, of course, would have to teach him some manners. Meanwhile, the disciples in the sanctuary were still striving to train so they could contribute to the Gold Saints fighting out there. Kagaho, at this point, ignored Baron and stepped past him to find Doko, but Baron held him back, so he started to ignite a flame to burn Baron. However, Baron thought this weak flame couldn't do anything, and taught him how to bow with a powerful strike to the ground. Kagaho was forced to turn into fire to escape and keep his distance from Baron. He then had to introduce himself to Baron, and Baron continued to cross his arms, making Kagaho angry that he dared to show such an attitude in a battle like this. Of course, Baron could be this nonchalant because he believed he could defeat Kagaho without even trying. Kagaho admitted that Baron was quite interesting, so he launched a blazing light attack, but Baron still didn't need to move to block it. He then counterattacked Kagaho, sending him flying far away. Baron noticed that although Kagaho's fire was strong, it burned everything, including himself. He began to think that Kagaho's ability was nonsense, but Kagaho claimed he didn't care about anything other than serving Hades. At this moment, 3 disciples were remembering their time with Baron in the past. He had taken in orphan children under one roof and raised them. But one day, he was called back to the sanctuary, so he had to leave the children behind. The 3 who loved him the most chose to follow him to be trained as saints, but the training was too harsh. One was scared because he only wanted to follow Baron to be close to him. War was indeed very frightening, but just as a stone pillar was about to fall, Baron ran to support it and enlighten them about the ideal of strength. Thanks to that, now everyone was full of determination to become stronger to stand on par with Baron. Suddenly, they noticed Baron's power surging recently. At this point, Baron had faced Kagaho's attack to see how strong he was. Baron countered with a bull charge, which Kagaho managed to dodge. Kagaho was confident that he had figured out Baron's technique. Baron's crossed arms were a way to hide the timing of his attacks. Although Baron's speed was very fast, Kagaho was also confident in his own speed, so he decided to test who could be faster, him or Baron. Doko had sensed Kagaho nearby and quickly ran over, discovering many Silver Saints had been defeated along the way. They had all been knocked down by an extremely fast opponent without being able to resist. Doko suspected he was right and ran even faster. And now, Baron truly had to pay for his arrogance. He started to get burned by Kagaho's fire. When Kagaho recklessly charged at him, Baron grabbed his head and slammed it into the wall. But Kagaho unleashed a technique that bound Baron with fire. Unable to move, Baron couldn't block Kagaho's attacks, and when Doko arrived, he only saw Baron severely burned. Doko furiously charged at Kagaho, thinking he had killed Baron. Kagaho managed to dodge and claimed that he came looking for Doko, but Baron interfered, so he bound him with fire and burned him to death. However, Baron wasn't actually dead and asked Doko to step back from his fight. He believed that a Gold Saints battle should be one-on-one, and he wouldn't be easily burned by this fire. Just then, Baron's 3 disciples arrived. None of them wanted Baron to die. This image momentarily reminded Kagaho of his brother. One disciple picked up Baron's hat and returned it to him. They wanted to become stronger so Baron could lead them in future battles, so this time he absolutely had to survive. Baron then returned to the battle, and Kagaho decided he wouldn't stop until Baron could no longer stand. He then began to launch his attack and created a large pillar of fire. Inside it, he added 3 explosive light orbs to overwhelm Baron. Baron endured this heat and then launched an attack that smashed the ground. The entire ground suddenly shattered, causing Kagaho to lose his footing and be crushed by rocks. He managed to stand up afterwards but had lost a wing. He questioned Baron for not finishing him off when he had the chance, to which Baron replied that Kagaho's nature was still good. Kagaho wasn't completely on the side of the specters, but was seeking an ideal figure to serve. He believed that saints or specters meant nothing to him. He chose whom he wanted to serve himself. He then turned his back and left, while Baron could now lie down. Although he was beaten up badly, Baron could still smile because it had been a long time since he had used all his strength. Baron then reported back to the Grand Pope, who was quite surprised that someone as strong as him was beaten up to this extent. He reported on the fact that the barrier was gradually shrinking and the shadows were being resurrected gradually. They had to find a way to deal with it before Athena completely collapsed. At this moment, a gold saint named Sisyphus arrived. He informed them that Athena was also nearing her limit and they had to release her from the duty of maintaining this barrier soon. Sisyphus then noticed that currently 2 gold saints had departed and one was seriously injured. But Baron thought he could still fight, so Sisyphus lightly struck him and saw that Baron was more injured than he thought. Baron knew that Sisyphus was the one who cherished Athena the most because he had been close to Athena since she was brought here, and it was also he who had taken Athena away from her 2 friends. Now he wondered if bringing Athena here and then causing Alone to become Hades was the right decision. But at this moment, a pillar of energy descended. Athena's barrier had been broken and Hades had personally come here. Sasha was very shocked to meet Alone again, but he claimed that he was now Hades. Hades ruthlessly destroyed Athena's temple. Everyone was angry that Hades dared to intrude here, and moreover, he came alone as if challenging them. Doko and Shin still harbored hatred for the day Hades destroyed Tenma's homeland. But Hades didn't like anyone interrupting his reunion with Athena, so he used a technique to immobilize Shin and Doko. Baron and Sisyphus were no exception. Hades approached Athena and claimed that he was no longer her brother, but now he was Hades, and he tried to evoke Athena's memories from previous lives within Sasha. Sisyphus had to struggle to stand up. Baron had to admire Sisyphus because he himself couldn't stand, but Sisyphus still managed to get up. But the result was only being pushed down harder by Hades. Sisyphus stood up once again and drew his bow, trying to aim at Hades. He realized that Sisyphus was the one who had taken Athena away 5 years ago. He still believed that what he did then was to protect Athena, but sometimes he still thought he was wrong to do so. He then shot an arrow at Hades, but it was deflected back, and he departed. Athena was extremely angry, and this was exactly what Hades wanted. But at this moment, a teleportation occurred and Tenma had arrived to reunite once again. He had taken out a rosary and sealed all the souls of those who were about to be resurrected. Hades was quite surprised because in just a short time of not seeing him, he had obtained a weapon to counter his army. Tenma believed that he had been fighting until now because of the promise to stay by his two friends' side, not to confront his close friend. He asked Hades if he really had the heart to attack Sasha the way he had destroyed their hometown. He remained silent while Tenma noticed a dog running towards Hades. It was the dog he had saved before, and it suddenly turned into Cerberus. Hades claimed that things were different now, because now it was the Holy War. Tenma had to pull Sasha away from Cerberus. Hades thought it was good that he could help him seal the shadows, because his mission was to bring death and salvation to all creatures from saints to shadows. Tenma took the rosary and rushed up to punch Cerberus's mouth, then rushed straight to Hades to fulfill the promise made in the underworld. But Hades easily immobilized Tenma and claimed that he was no longer as radiant as before. After that, he was about to thrust his sword into Tenma when suddenly a magic formation appeared. Hades suddenly lost his power and was surrounded by talismans. The Grand Pope appeared and said that surely Hades still remembered him. He recognized the Pope as one of the survivors from the previous Holy War. He had partially dispelled Hades' power so everyone could move again. The Grand Pope had prepared this trap beforehand, but unexpectedly caught Hades. However, Hades blew away the Grand Pope with one hand, claiming these talismans were just outdated things from the Holy War 200 years ago. Moreover, he was interfering with his reunion with Tenma, making him even more deserving of death. Although reluctant to admit it, the Grand Pope was indeed no match for him. He then signaled Sasha to use her power and teleport the entire temple to a tower. This was where all of Hades' army had been sealed 200 years ago, and he planned to seal him here once and for all, returning a kind alone to Sasha and Tenma. But Hades just thought they were too naive. At this moment, a voice rang out and struck at Tenma and Sasha. Both managed to dodge and a horse-drawn carriage landed. It was Pandora's carriage. The Grand Pope recognized her as Hades' right-hand woman and the one who had released evil into this world. Pandora admitted that she had always been Hades' loyal servant, and that she should have been the one reincarnated as either Hades' sister or lover. Yet a goddess like Athena dared to take a mortal body and become Hades' sister to monitor him. However, Athena didn't care about those words because the days spent with Alone and Tenma were very happy for her. Pandora thought she was still talking back, so she was about to slap her when Tenma stood up to block it. Hades had started to get bored, so he asked Pandora to return. When Tenma didn't let them go, Hades showed him how vast the difference in their powers was. Hades then created a painting in the sky, depicting the gold saints and all people in the world. Once Hades completed the painting, everyone would die. Everyone in the sanctuary could see this and knew it was created by Hades. Hades told Tenma that this painting would be completed when it covered the entire sky and contained the souls of everyone in the world, and Tenma surely knew what would happen to those painted by Hades, as he had experienced it himself and knew how terrible it was. Hades then got on the carriage to return because he was too bored. Tenma wanted to chase after him, but was attacked by a specter. Baron had to stand up to block her because he believed Tenma was the one who could defeat Hades. He had rushed up and clung to the carriage to demand an answer from Hades, but when he was about to punch, Pandora shot him down. The specter also left just like that. Hades asked Pandora if she had secretly let the specter follow to monitor him, but she stammered and dared not answer. Meanwhile, the high-ranking specters saw that Hades was still too impulsive because he still couldn't cut off the memories of being with Athena and Tenma. They needed to do something to truly awaken Hades and completely discard Alone's memories. The Grand Pope and Athena realized that the opportunity to bring Alone back was almost gone, and the only thing they could do now was to confront Hades. 3 days had passed. Everyone began the process of rebuilding the sanctuary, but everyone was anxious about Hades' painting. Doko had to come and knock on Tenma's head to make him go to work. He was still glad that he was alive and had returned here to confront Hades. He felt sorry for Sisyphus because he was hit by Hades and was still unconscious. According to the Grand Pope, Hades could inflict damage directly on human souls, so Sisyphus was still unconscious and might be difficult to wake up again. Tenma now had no lingering feelings for Alone because if Alone had retained his consciousness, he wouldn't have done these cruel things. Doko also advised him to defeat Hades as soon as possible because Hades was now a terrible threat to the world. But somehow they still hoped he could bring Alone back because both Sisyphus and Athena believed that he and Hades had some kind of connection. Tenma was then approached by Baron's student for help with carrying things. Seeing the student carry more items than himself made Tenma even more eager to become stronger and help him. Meanwhile, Pandora suddenly encountered 2 other underworld gods. They believed Pandora was too slow in controlling Hades and suggested that if she didn't do her job properly, they would be the ones to help Hades focus entirely on completing the painting. Pandora's task was to eliminate what was distracting Hades. She then decided to take decisive action once and for all. She went to the room of the other constellations and summoned 2 assassins with the aim of targeting Tenma. They believed they would act quickly so Tenma wouldn't have time to react. Pandora was determined to help Hades become unburdened, and her own heart would no longer be uneasy. At this time, Baron had gone to Athena's palace to pay respects with a glass of wine. Baron wanted to apologize for once having doubts about Athena, but now he swore to join the Gold Saints in sealing all the specters with the rosary that Athena had given her life to create. Upon leaving, Baron noticed quite a few bats around. He then saw Tenma and his students training together, so he decided to join in and help Tenma practice. He stood still for Tenma to strike, but even when Tenma used his full strength to hit Baron, he couldn't move him and was instead thrown back by Baron. They practiced until evening when Baron's students suddenly fell asleep, unable to resist. Tenma, who was still training, also fell asleep upon hearing the bat's sound. Baron was no exception. Taking advantage of this moment, the 2 assassins snuck in to kill Tenma. However, before they could act, Baron told them to stop. He had destroyed his own hearing to avoid hearing the bat's sound and launched an attack that shattered one assassin's mask. But the bat controller arrived and stabbed Baron in the side. The 2 then decided to team up against Baron. They originally only wanted to deal with Tenma, but taking down a gold saint would be even better. They continuously attacked, causing Baron's old wounds to reopen. Despite being beaten like a punching bag, he managed to grab one by the neck and slam him to the ground. The other decided to summon the messenger of death, believing that whether Baron could hear the song or not, it would stop his heart. Baron then collapsed, and the other assassin thought he had finished the job, so he turned his attention to Tenma. But Baron still had a bit of consciousness left. He only hoped that his students and Tenma would continue to live and grow. He reached out to grab the head of the masked assassin and launched his ultimate technique. In the end, only 1 weak assassin survived and planned to deal with Tenma to claim credit. However, Kagaho arrived and stopped this weak assassin. Kagaho believed that Hades wouldn't want anyone to take Tenma's life, so he would keep Tenma alive and question who ordered the assassination. After hearing it was Pandora and the purpose of this assassination, the other assassin tried to persuade Kagaho to join in killing Tenma and share the credit, but Kagaho promptly eliminated him. When Tenma woke up, he saw that Baron had died. Kagaho informed him that Baron died because Tenma was too weak, that Pandora had ordered his assassination, and that Baron died protecting him. If Tenma wanted to know more, he would have to become stronger and find out for himself. Kagaho then turned away, believing he had repaid his debt to Baron. Baron's students also woke up and couldn't stop grieving. Tenma could only feel remorseful as the fault was partly his. The next day, Tenma heard people discussing how Baron had died protecting him. Tenma decided to leave this place, partly due to guilt and partly because he didn't want anyone else to die for him. Doko and Shin then had to set out to find Tenma, as they suspected he was feeling uneasy after witnessing so many gold saints fall. Worse, Tenma could be charged with desertion if he left at this moment. Meanwhile, Baron's 2 disciples visited his grave. The girl thought she might give up on becoming a saint due to lack of talent, but she would step back to serve as an assistant to help in the war. She hoped her friend would soon develop and inherit Baron's gold cloth. Tenma passed by and saw both of them, which only increased his sense of guilt. Suddenly, another gold saint approached him and informed him that Doko and Shin were frantically searching for him. Tenma believed he was currently a target being hunted by Pandora, and if he stayed, more people like Baron would die. But the gold saint just laughed and said Baron died because he was weak. This is war, and death is inevitable. Moreover, a bronze saint like Tenma couldn't stop the holy war. Bluntly put, Tenma was too weak, and that's why he was running away. If Tenma intended to desert, the gold saint would execute him. However, he had no intention of killing Tenma as he was still useful, so he would imprison him and release him when needed. Tenma struggled and tried to break out of the prison, but it was futile. His armor had been taken away, and he didn't know what he was trying to do anymore. He knew how ashamed he would be if Atmi and Baron saw his current state. They had sacrificed themselves and placed their trust in him, yet he couldn't do anything worthwhile. Meanwhile, Pandora realized her assassination plan had failed. If Hades found out about her acting on her own, he would surely be angry, but she believed Hades would understand her. Suddenly, the bishop from before approached. He would forgive Pandora's failure this time, but she must explain herself to Hades. No matter what she did, Hades would never care about her feelings, and eventually, they would grow apart. Hades would neglect his painting and go looking for Tenma, but they would lend her power to keep Hades here. Pandora then went to see Hades and was reprimanded for daring to act on her own. But she noticed that Hades still retained childhood memories with his 2 friends, so she decided that those memories had tainted Hades. She used the flower branch given by the other person to lock Hades in a closed space to focus on painting. Tenma, at this time, was trying to break out of his cell using both his powers and bare hands. Suddenly, Dado arrived and showed him an escape route he had dug. Dado couldn't understand why he always had such bad luck when it came to Tenma. Tenma was led outside and reunited with Rika, who had also become a saint and would go with Dado and Tenma to the end. He knew the elder was involved in this matter and stated directly that he wanted to go to Hades' palace. The high priest believed that Tenma should be kept imprisoned for safety within the sanctuary's territory. Athena reluctantly agreed, but the elder had arrived. He thought they should let Tenma act as he wished because they couldn't clip Tenma's wings. If they did, he would never be able to reach alone. The elder had released him on his own authority and took full responsibility for him. The high priest had to accept letting the elder take care of Tenma. He also advised Athena, or rather Sasha, to meet Tenma once to say goodbye. She left her sacred staff and ran off alone. The high priest and the elder knew there were 2 people behind manipulating Pandora. Those 2 now realized that Tenma was coming to find Hades, so they decided to set traps outside the palace so he couldn't get inside. Dado was complaining about not being able to meet Athena one last time before leaving when suddenly she came to find them. When Tenma met Sasha again, he decided to promise her that all three friends would meet again. He would be determined to face everything in this holy war. That was his promise, and he would try to fulfill it. This concludes the first part of the film.